Welcome back, my friends, to the sweet spot where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. It's Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holden and Paul Lewis.
Hey there.
Hey guys.
Traveling, at home.
Yes,
So
both
both of those at the same time. Yeah, I've done that before. The last time I did that was an agile conference. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton, but they're like, we'd really like you to, they were paying for it, right? And they're like, we'd really like you to stay at the hotel. And I'm like, but I live in Denver. Like, yeah, but we'd still like you to stay at the hotel. It's easier for you to participate. Like, otherwise you're just going to race home and have dinner. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, it's fine. I was just going to save you some bucks, you know? So I show up and the hotel's like, thank you for staying with us, Mr. Holton. We've got you in an upgrade. I hope it's okay. I'm like, it's a waste, but sure, it's fine. Okay, well, we put you in the presidential suite.
Nice.
Ooh.
And I'm like, okay, fine. So I go check in, get to the presidential suite. It has seating in the main room area for 21 people.
Nice.
I counted all the seats.
Wow.
Right. It has a bigger dining room table than my dining room table at home.
And it was a glass top.
And I'm like, no, it was all done in like a very Denver design. So it's all like a hunting cabin design.
Got it. Yeah.
It was really cool. So I called my wife. I'm like, honey, look, I know this is going to be difficult for you. I know this is going to be a pain, but you really need to come stay at this hotel for at least one night. The total and utter and absolute waste for me otherwise.
Oddly enough, I recently talked to 3 people who know you who also live in Denver. And I said, how often do you grab a meal with Howard, as an example? And their answers were, Howard lives so far away, it's hard to call it Denver. Would that be interesting? Like all 3 of them essentially said the same thing.
Well, so last night, my friends from Canada came down to New Mexico. That's how we refer to it internally. Because they're so far north, we call them Canada. We're so far south, they call us New Mexico.
I see.
So
It may have been the same person I was talking to, one of the 3. So you're far away from downtown.
Is one of the 3 an attorney?
No.
Okay, then it wasn't the people I'm talking about.
I also live far from downtown. I live a 2-hour commute, so I'm back to back in Toronto.
I'm 25 minutes from downtown.
Oh, I see.
It's not. Denver's not really that big. Like the guy in Canada to me is an hour.
I see.
50 minutes actually.
I am 45 minutes from the airport, and I'm still in the city.
Which airport?
The Miami airport.
Oh, Miami airport.
Yeah, the FLL is probably 30 because one is down, the other one is like the opposite direction.
Right.
And if you get traffic, you're gonna be in the 95 for an hour and a half.
Oh no! See, that's the lovely thing about where I live. It is 26 minutes to the airport. I don't care what time you leave. Rush hour, it's 26 minutes to the airport.
Nice. No,
it's always 20 because it's a toll road to get to the airport from my house. So there's never C470, and so there's never any traffic to be spoken of. You know what I mean? Like you may have 30 seconds of slowdown, but that's it.
Right.
There's construction, but even the construction, I can't tell you the last time I had a true construction slowdown.
No toll roads from my house to downtown, and it took me 2.5 hours this morning.
No, they told you in time, not money.
That's right.
And your speed limits are wonky slow.
Yes. Yeah. There are very few 110 kilometer per hours here. So few, I only know of 2.
Right. and that's on the high end.
It's as high as it gets. The regular highway would be 100. Yeah, which is
kilometers an hour, which is 62.
62, yeah.
Right.
110 is as high as we get, and that is you'd have to be very, very rural on a highway to get to 110.
No. So the freeway for me, that C470 is 75. Yeah. We have mostly 70s. Everyone does 85, and no one cares.
I see.
Isn't there a road in Montana that is like no speed limit or something?
That used to be true. So historically, the speed limits on the freeways were set by the federal government. Right. And so for a long time, you'd have states where the state highways had higher speed limits than the freeways. And so the federal government, like we originally set that because of the gas crisis, and 55 was determined to be this kind of nice mix of fuel efficiency.
Right.
So we no longer care. You're the state. You can set it yourself. And Montana went, okay, cool. We're just not going to set one. Well, because I mean, if you thought about it, if they gave every single person that came into Montana a sign and said, we want a sign put up every 5 miles, it would take them 35 years to put up signs.
I see.
Like there's no one in the state. The state is so empty. And then it got taken advantage of, let's say. And so they've changed it and now they've put up signs and there are speed limits, which I still think are 80.
Wow.
Like it's a generous speed limit. And there's so many divided highways, right? Where it's 30 feet and there's no loops for 40 miles. I've heard you could do 135 and no one's going to stop you.
Wow.
I've heard. It's
That feels
rumored.
unsafe. Does it not feel unsafe at that speed?
No, I've heard it does not. I've heard in the right vehicle it feels fine.
Yeah.
Heard.
Yeah. In the right vehicle, getting from Miami to Gardner Conference, you can do around 120.
Oh, I've done 120 on the freeways in Florida.
Yeah.
Supposedly.
Theoretically.
Yes.
So,
I mean, I did all of that. Like there's no. But yeah, I mean, the Florida freeways, do they even turn? Like,
yeah,
they're flat as hell, right? I can't.
a little bit. They
Like-
actually turn so you don't fall asleep.
There's no gator crossings? There's not?
No, because there's barely no water. So if you go down west, like literally where I live is the last highway where you get to the Everglades.
Right.
That area, they actually put gates and like fences
Right,
so the
so they
gators
can't
will not cross because you're going right in between
Right.
the Everglades. But going towards Orlando, you don't see them. When you get to Orlando, that's a different story. You may see some.
Right.
They're not, when they're on the highway, they're not called alligators. They're called Florida speed bumps.
Nice.
So we laugh a lot. There's a lot of different trades that we as leaders need to be able to help a company grow. I think that our audience, as they're getting ready for this last quarter and planning for the next, may be in a planning phase or helping define how the company that they work for or their team may want to move forward. Can we jump into how probably leaders get into that process? How do they become a active participant on the growth for the company?
I kind of like that you combined two of the topics we're going to talk about. Even though on the surface, one could argue they were going to be separate, but I now see how you've combined them, right? So we talked about, in many ways, the executive or the CTO, the CIO as an entrepreneur and what kind of traits you need as that entrepreneur. But then on the other side, are those entrepreneurial traits of a CIO, CTO used in the process of contributing to the growth planning of an organization? Right? That's worthy of a deep dive. And let me do a setup before I think how.
No, I think the question's even broader than that, right?
Even broader.
If we look at a startup,
Yeah.
And you look at what makes a successful startup, it's often said you need two people. You need a hustler and a hacker. Right.
Yep.
The hustler is that sales guy, the Steve Jobs. You need a hacker, the person that builds the thing called Wozniak.
Yes.
They're the penultimate hacker and hustler, right? And so if that's what's required to start a tech startup, to start a startup that works and is functional and grows and has those things that are necessary, is that also the job of the CIO then to be the hustler within the technology function to help the business grow? And instead of having one hacker, they have teams of hackers to help execute that vision.
Look at you. You've made the bridge. Nice. So let's talk about both of those things, but let's talk about the entrepreneur one first. So let's set a premise, and you can agree or disagree with the premise, but let's set the premise that there is a valuable set of traits for a CIO or CTO to be, in many ways, an entrepreneur. It could be because you're part of a startup. It's a technology startup or a scientific startup, or it's because you have some sort of entrepreneurial spirit in IT in a large organization. But both can be true. right? It's quite possible it's a technology company that's, let's say, a people services company. And while you might be a small internal technology team, they're still giving you a level of empowerment to have some sort of entrepreneurial spirit.
Okay.
So given that, I recently watched a presentation that would suggest that there's sort of key VC traits to this kind of entrepreneur, whether it's a business entrepreneur or CTO. And I thought they were interesting enough we could talk about. So the three key traits are grit. This is somebody who, has, nerves of steel, that are rolling up their sleeves and persevering through the complexities of finding your way through the process of seed money and first round and second round, and discovering all the programs that are in place to do that. It's a lot of work that if you've never done it before, you're really on sort of the leading edge, the learning edge. That's number one. Number two, that you can tell a story, right? That you pitch well, that the narrative of what you're trying to become, because it hasn't been realized yet, is something that you're skilled at doing. And then finally, that you have a bias to action. In fact, you used the word already, hustle, right? That you're working the 90 hours, you're driving your team to deliver on some sort of proof of concept. So those are the three: grit, narrative, bias. Do you buy those? Is it not true? Is it more than one person? Is there a fourth, fifth, sixth?
I mean, I still think it's two people, right? I think, like, if we think of tech startups especially, we see a lot of the hackers, right? And then we also see a lot of hustlers, but we don't see that combo together. And I think it requires that combo together as two different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's other things that are missing from the list as well. Like, if you're going to be a successful founder, I think you need a bias towards trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at the very least, you have to have a bias towards trust to your co-founder or co-founders, plural.
Right.
I think it requires a massive network, right? I don't think you can get away being a founder without a focus on your network, right? All of the things that you kind of have to do before you find yourself in that role, I think, are also some of the intangibles. But I think they're also the same things that make a good CIO, right? I think a good CIO should think of themselves as the CEO of a tech startup, right? Where their customer base isn't the total addressable market of anything, but rather the company itself. And then the B2B to C relationship is the customers of the company that you work for.
So is there a parallel? Like, I'm thinking in an entrepreneurial sense, especially one that's coming, let's say, out of academia, one of the more important stakeholders is like your advisory board, right?
Sure.
You might have a medical advisory board, or something about research or academic, or a VC type advisory board member, somebody to help you get the money. Is there an equivalent as an entrepreneurial CTO, whether it be stakeholders inside the organization or stakeholders outside of the organization?
I think it's both stakeholders inside and outside the organization, right? And I think we are really good at feeding one and not really good at feeding the other, typically, right? Like, if you're listening to this and you're a tech executive, think about who is your advisory board inside the business, and have you done a good job building it and care and feeding for it? Forget about if you've ever thought about it in that language, because most of us haven't. Like, I haven't until this conversation, but it serves the same function, right? My peers inside the business, they don't have to be tech knowledgeable. They have to know
Technological. That's good.
knowledgeable. They I totally didn't just make that up right now. But they have to be able to advise you on, are the actions you do within technology achieving the stated business goals that you have, right? And if they're not doing that, well, one, have you asked them? Like, have you set them up for success? And two, are they the right peers for you to have? Are they the right advisors for you to have within the business?
Mm-hmm.
And then externally, you should have some as well, right? Being a CIO and working in tech, there's actually, unlike a lot of the other pieces of the business, we can have a much more direct relationship with people in a similar role in direct competitors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we don't, for the most part, right, to talk kind of broadly and stereotypically, we don't really compete the same way.
Right.
We all stand on each other's shoulders. So So who are those people, right? Who are your external advisors? Who are from buying organizations that are a peer to you, right? Do you have people that are external to the organization that can talk about how easy your company is to deal with, to buy from, to interact with, to partner with? If you don't, those definitely need to go on that advisory board, right? And then, do you have mentors? I don't care who you are, you should have a mentor,
Oh,
or 12, right? And all of those people come together to make up that advisory board in the same exact way. If you started out on your own and you were the CEO of a new tech startup, you'd have an advisory board made up very much the same way, right? It'd be the people that invested in you and thus have a vested interest. It'd be made up of customers. It'd be made up of partners. It'd be made up of mentors, all of whom are now motivated to see you succeed in the same way the whole list I just gave were motivated to see you succeed. Some to a much greater level than others, you know.
And one could argue, especially in the entrepreneurial side, the role of the advisors is to fill in all the gaps. So you're not looking for overlap in the Venn diagram. You don't need an advisor necessarily that knows what you know. You need an advisory that absolutely knows things you don't know, right? Somebody who knows how to get money. Some who have commercialized healthcare technology in the past, right? Information that you don't have that you could, use in a real time sense.
I don't have a lot of I'm trying to think of an advisor I have that knows what I know. I can't think of one. And I can't think of a situation where that was the thing that I was missing. Like, there's overlap, sure, but the overlap is these minor little slices of overlap.
Right.
And for me, like, if you like put yourself at the center of the Venn diagram and you go, this is everything that I know, and then as you start overlapping, you should have a whole ring that is completely overlapped, but it shouldn't really go any deeper than that. Otherwise, aren't you wasting a bunch of energy?
Yeah, you're just hearing the same information you already know.
Right. I don't want it echoed back at me. I want the perspective I don't have, not the perspective I already freaking have. Right.
And my guess is it happens less than 5% of the time that you have an advisory board, which is already not likely. But let's say you do have an advisory board. It's made up of your friends and family, right? People you already know, which isn't helpful because they already know you intrinsically. Or it's made up of technology vendors, again, which also isn't helpful because they're motivated by selling you product, right? What it isn't filled with is more mentors than you think you should have, and more, even though if they're peers in another industry or at a different scale, or
different scale.
Exactly.
Other industry is easy. Different scale is hard. And I don't know that there's a whole lot of people that concentrate on that. That's one of the things that I always look for is, what can I learn? If my scale was drastically different, what could I learn from that?
Right. Yeah. Going from 100 people to 1,000 people, do I lead differently?
Yeah. If I go from a startup to a megacorp, right? How does that change? What's the dynamic? How does the job change? How does the role change? How does the language itself change fundamentally? Right.
And if your advisory panel, your advisory group also includes internal resources or internal executives, this leans on one of the pet peeves I usually have is, I have peers that might say, you have internal IT operations and therefore I am your client. Right? You are my vendor to me. And my response to them is always, absolutely not. I might have teams of people that perform and create a service for you, but we are peers. Right? I am not you're not my customer. I am not your vendor. That's not the relationship we're going to have. The relationship we're going to have is that we're mutually delivering on value for the company. Right?
See, and I'm okay with the other relationship. I'm okay, because if I am in fact your vendor, then I can fire you at any time. Right. And let's see how well the business operates when I fire you.
Right.
And then we can come back to the table and talk about how the business actually operates and how much value we both have in that.
Right.
Like, if closer to peers, the first conversation is to establish subservience, that's not going to fly very well. Instead, I'd rather just fire you.
Right. That's a good response. I've never responded that way. I've usually responded, no, we're both measured the same way, i.e. the financials of the company, and therefore we're working together to actually grow this business. I'm not delivering you services to which you consume so that you can grow the business. That's not the relationship we're going to have.
It's not the relationship we should have.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot of organizations that look at it that way. And shorthand, like you can look at it that way. You are providing services to the business to help the business succeed. Right? I don't think we've said that a different way, but you are not subservient to the VP of bullshit because the VP of bullshit consumes your services.
Right.
Like that's not the way that works. And yet I'm sure there's a ton of executives that absolutely feel that way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's okay to be wrong as long as you learn from
it. Which leads me to the other half of the conversation, right? To say, if technology executives could be considered entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial within the organization, they've got to have these skills, and you described sort of the gaps in the three that I described. Then how should we expect the CIO and CTO to contribute and participate in the growth program of an organization? And if so, how? And if I were to describe sort of the stages of that growth program. So the stages of the growth program would include define. So define means think of it as our internal current state, right? What's the acronym we use? The SWOT, right? What's our strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats? How do we assess our business model, right? How do we document it in a canvas? Things like that. That's the define. Analyze is saying, well, let's get some data on this. Let's get an appreciation over the last 5 years of financials, where we're good and where we're bad, where we're profitable, where we're not, where our margins are, where utilization is, that kind of stuff. And then externally, well, where do we fit into the bigger picture, right? We're a piece of a much bigger ecosystem. Or what's our market share? What do our competitors do? And I often ask the question, who are our competitors now? Who do we want our competitors to be? Because I think those are two different questions, right? So,
and what are our competitors, like who are our competitors now, and what are they not doing that we then want to do?
Right.
How are they not serving the market, and in many ways, how are they not serving us?
So define, analyze, and then strategize. So now that we have our business model canvas, what changes do we want to make, and what kind of outcome do we think that's going to produce, right? Implement. So here's the set of tactical activities. The presumption is, of course, CIO and CTO is implementing some of those activities. And then finally, monitoring. Now that we've implemented the activities and we see it operating, now we've got to come back and say, did it actually work? So of those 4 programs, back to the original question, should the CIO and CTO participate in the growth program, even as an entrepreneur or as some other executive? And then how would they participate in each of the phases?
Well, considering you're not making any money today without technology, right? And I'll give you, there's an argument to be made that you could, but you won't have a CIO or a CTO. Right. Then yes, the CIO and CTO should absolutely be part of those conversations. It's very hard, because otherwise you're saying we need to make new money, because that's what growth is. It's new money.
Yep.
And we're going to do it in a way that is somewhat different than how we've done before, because again, otherwise it's not a growth program. I want to do X, Y, and Z. Cool. Everybody not tech figures it out and then comes to tech and says, we're ready to do this thing, go make it happen. At which point the tech goes, it doesn't work that way.
Or it's $100 million.
Right. Or, hey, to do it that way, it's going to cost $100 million. Or, hey, it's actually way easier to do it this way. Or 7 of our competitors already tried that and it failed, and you don't know about it because you didn't talk to any of the technologists who follow that sort of thing. Right. So yes, there's no advantage to not having them in the room. Now, I will tell you, if your organization, like if you're a CIO, if you're a CEO or you're a COO and you're like, not my CTO, not my CIO, you have the wrong one.
Right. That's a key problem right there. Right? You don't think they can contribute to growth programs.
You have the wrong one.
Yeah.
Right. Like seriously, just replace them. Find another one. There's plenty. If you need some recommendations, reach out to us. We're happy to help you find somebody. So yes, they should absolutely unequivocally be in the room. Right. And the goal there is, how do I leverage technology to help enable that thing to happen? And how do I say, no, let's steer this direction? If you're the technology expert in the room, then you really need to understand how is the business that you're in or want to be in best set to utilize technology, and what should they do to be better set to utilize technology.
Hmm.
Right. And so as you go through every one of those steps, there is definitely a technology imperative to some degree, and maybe 100%. Maybe the new market you're going to move into has marketing and tech and nobody else. That's entirely possible, plausible, right? But I find it hard to believe that modern growth in an organization that has a CIO and or a CTO would have a growth initiative that technology should not be involved in.
And I don't believe it matters what the company does, whether it's produces and sells cookies
No,
or
it doesn't
actually
matter
is
at
a data product company.
It doesn't matter at all.
It's the same participation.
Correct.
Right. And maybe, your CIO, CTO is new, they're 3 months in, but at the very least, that's both an education for that person, and they're going to bring unbiased external opinion right out of the box, right? The only thing they have is unbiased, objective external opinion. That's great. Consume that as if it's, raw data.
Well, let's use the cookie example. What are you going to do with cookies that doesn't involve a machine? You're doing it at scale. Again, you're a company that has a CIO and a CTO.
Right.
You're doing it at scale, so there's machines involved. If there's machines involved, there's data being generated.
Right.
And if you're launching a growth initiative today and you're like, oh, we don't care about the data, fire yourself. Like, you're the wrong person to be in the room.
Right.
Right? The world is about data. Data is going to tell you whether you're running well or running poorly. So data must be in the room, which means your CIO and your CTO must be in the room. Just understanding the protocols that you need to talk is important today. Understanding how the new factory should be designed to produce your new cookie line is all about a data and tech question long before it's about a people question. Right.
So let's go through the 5 steps, just because we have time, and I think it'd be intellectually appealing. So define, right? So define. Think of this as the SWOT, right? The current state. Do we think that there's any technological implications to strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats?
Absolutely. In every single one. Why would there not be, right?
It's both as a limitation and as an advantage. Don't you want to know that we have a 70% not current, right? 70% of our infrastructure and software is not supported by the original vendor to which I bought it.
Well, even then, even if we say this is a whole, like, we're going to stand up a parallel business, great. I have no people that can do that, or I have 7 people that are perfect for that know how we work now. Right. I could move those 7 people over, right? We could jumpstart the technology side of this business relatively easily, right? Or, hey, we can also enable technology to query the existing workforce to see how many of them are familiar with competitors that exist within this space. All of that is a technology question.
And skill sets, right? If you look at the current state to say, if we want to do something different, can we do it with the team that we have, or do we have to look at augmenting our team to support new skill sets? So on the analyze side, which is much more of a data-centric thing, I'm going to have to work with finance, obviously, to find the last 6 years worth of interesting data. But I probably have to do that with operations. I probably have to do that with supply chain. I probably have to do that with product management. I've got to go through the organization and say, if data exists to produce information, right, that I can use to make a decision on, let me help you get to the point where you can surface that outcome, that output, so that I can make that available.
And finance is going to look at the market and say, these are our 9 competitors. These are the 3 that have parity to us. These are the 2 that are larger. These are the, what did I leave left there? 4 that are smaller. These are the 2 that we think would be good acquisition targets. Cool. Technology needs to be involved in that. Okay, cool. In order for us to do that, option 1 is going to take us 7.5 years to integrate because they look nothing like us. Option 2 is going to take 6 months to integrate because they look a lot like us. And oh, by the way, we have 111 people that used to work for them. Right. Like, again, I don't see a point where, and that's just back of the napkin math on where you'd plug a tech executive in instantly. Right. There's 1,000 other places where you'd want to look, but those are big, obvious blocks.
Yeah. And there's all that internal data with all those internal, environments, whether it's utilization or sort of the finance, the achievement, but then the external stuff to say, where do I fit in the ecosystem, right? Am I wallet share 1%? Am I wallet share 30%, right? Am I number 10 in the list of vendors, or am I number 3 in the list of vendors? And if you don't really know that, you're not going to appreciate that. We did talk about competitors just a second ago, and I did have a lunch with I want to use the word startup, but they've been doing it for 13 years, right? One could argue that they've been successful to a certain extent, but then they've hit a wall in many ways, and that wall might have been 6 years long. They're okay, but they haven't got to a point where they've been able to dramatically grow. Yeah. And I asked a relatively simple question. I said, given over 13 years period of time, your product that you've created has exploded, right? It's grown up dramatically. Who are your intended competitors to start with? Who are your competitors now? And who do you want to actually be your competitor going forward? And the entrepreneur was, I don't have any of those answers. We didn't think about it when we started. It was just an interesting problem to solve. Now my answer is all these companies, which is insane. You can't be a competitor to all these companies. And then I haven't thought about what the future may hold. Who do I really want to be compared to? And that's the key question. It's not who your competitors are, but who do you want to be compared to? Because if you want to be compared to somebody who has a $10 billion R&D and you have a $100,000 R&D, that's a problem. Don't get compared to that list. Get compared to a list that's relatively of the same size of you, right? So that you're not always going to be behind the scenes. So does that resonate? Does that a question I asked make sense? And should we ask it of our own teams in our own company?
Oh, we absolutely should. At the same time, I don't think I agree with you on tilting at windmills.
Interesting.
Right. Okay. Dragons get killed every day. Right. And if you look at a lot of the dragons, right, a lot of these big monolithic organizations, being compared to them isn't bad. Being compared to them in a positive light makes you an acquisition target by them. Okay, cool. That could be a nice exit. But also they stagnate and calcify like crazy. Right. And sometime being compared to them and adding the word agile or adding the word relevant makes all the difference in the world. Right. You're like SAP, but you're more agile. You're like SAP, but you're more relevant. It's not bad things to hear. Right. Even if you are 1,000th the revenue of an SAP or an Amazon or a Microsoft or a insert Walmart. Right.
I guess it depends on whether you think your competitive differentiation is your set of features. Because my point to them was you won't be able to compete in the set of features because they can always deliver more features than you.
Oh, absolutely.
Compete on some other angle, and agility might be that angle, right? Sure. It's knowing the phone number for the CEO, right? That's the differentiator. Like better support because you're not calling a 1-800 number. Those are reasonable. But if you're comparing 100 features to 100 features, you're not going to win that game.
No, I agree, right? I mean, ultimately, if all it takes is a few dollars to reach parity with whatever your offering is, then your offering doesn't actually have value.
Right.
Right. And patent protection only lasts so long.
That's true.
Right. Patent protection only lasts until someone figures out a workaround to the patent.
Okay, so we talked, define, analyze, so strategize. Strategize is to be, right? As is, data to support where I am in the world, to be. What, if I look at my business model canvas and say, okay, I want to change my value proposition. I want to add these customer segments. I want to go to this geography. I want to spend differently than I earn. All of those dimensions of your business model. Where does the CIO and CTO participate? If it's not a technology company, if we're selling cookies.
Again, if we're selling cookies, logistics and supply chain is still a technology. Technology is a major influencer in that. How are we going to track market demand? How are we going to predict? How are we going to analyze? Like, what are we going to do? Again, it comes back to data, right? How do we know? How are we going to make a decision? Then how are we going to validate the decision? Where are we going to sell cookies, right? And then how do I validate that we're selling cookies in the right place to the right people in the right way? How do we know we're selling the right cookies in the right place in the right way? All of that is a technology question, even if you never touch the last mile from a technology standpoint.
But everything you just said were examples of the implement, the how. I'm talking about the what here. Right?
Yeah,
but looking at my business model canvas, I currently sell all of my cookies to teenagers. Okay. I really want to start selling it to seniors.
Okay. So how are we going to reach seniors?
It's not your background, right? As a CTO, that's all I'm saying. Is now we're getting to a territory where I haven't spent 30 years selling cookies. I don't necessarily know what it means.
Sure, but if I want to change markets and reach a new market, that's MarTech. That's marketing technology. The CIO and CTO still have to be able to support the technology side of the marketing effort. Right. Otherwise, you're telling marketing, hey, MarTech is really complex, and rather than have a technology partner to work with you, go figure it out on your own.
But do you think that the CIO, CTO, should come up with interesting ideas, right? I think we should go off seniors, or can participate at the same level of the rest of the executives to say whether that idea makes sense or not.
What doesn't it? I mean, yes, they should be able to. They should be able to be in the room and have an opinion.
Right.
But I just want to clarify something. There is no room in which every executive contributes to the same level, and whose contribution is reviewed at the same level. There's no room. That doesn't happen in any room.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say. That's what I was pushing you on, because I knew you were going to say it, because I've heard you say it before. It's absolutely true. While you're all peers in the room, you don't have all peer knowledge.
Right.
It's perfectly fine to have an opinion, an uninformed one. even if there are more informed opinions in there, that's okay. That's expected. But it's also not expected that you are informed on everything. You're not the CFO. You can't possibly have all gap knowledge. Right?
Well, and to that point, right? If we're like, well, we sell the kids today, we want to sell the seniors tomorrow, right? The marketing person should be the expert in the room on how best to reach seniors today.
Right.
The financial person should know what is the market rate for a cookie that seniors will buy, right? Like the salesperson should know how many outlets are there. The production person should know what is the difference in flavor profile and packaging for a senior. Like, you know what I mean? And so it'd be weird if the finance person was like, well, I think I totally disagree with you on the packaging. You are full of shit. And everybody just goes, well, I mean, sure, it's now 1-to-1. Let's go from there. No. There's someone in the room who is more weighed positively, and the CTO and CIO should have an opinion. I mean, especially since they, they're all of the C levels kind of skew to an age, and so they're probably more likely to have someone in the room who gums their cookie, and maybe that's the CIO and the CTO.
And I would go as far as to say, recognizing what your limitations in the room or knowledge limitation is valuable. Right, to 100%. Say in the room, listen, I don't have 30 years of cookies, so I'm going to rely on you, Ms. Supply Chain, Ms. Operations, to have that knowledge. And I'm going to receive the feedback as somebody objective, and I'm going to reflect back what I just heard. That is still a valuable
100%.
exercise.
Yeah, 100%. But it does require you to say stuff like that. Like, look, this isn't my space,
right?
But these are my thoughts. Take them for what they are. I'm in the room, so you might as well hear them.
The last two stages are the most obvious place where the CTOs and CIOs play, right?
Sure.
Implement, right? There's going to be a series of tasks. A good portion of them are technologically based, right? One's going to implement a digital transformation program, which ultimately this is, right? And guess what? A good portion of that is either application-centric or data-centric. And my guess is that's under the domain of the CIO, CTO, just throwing it out there, right?
Just a guess.
So you're responsible for delivering that?
Again, though, if it's not, you probably have the wrong CIO and CTO.
Correct. If they're abdicating the responsibility to deliver these tasks,
or if you're all sitting around the room and going, okay, we need to implement this. We need to have up-to-date data. We're going to have to drive some insights. We're going to have to be able to be agile and react on data as it's coming into us live. Should we talk to Bill? And everybody else in the room goes, oh, fuck Bill. You have the wrong person, right? What you should do instead is look at the finance person, or if the HR person's in the room, which they also should be, because you're going to have to staff.
Yeah.
You should go, hey, while you're staffing for the new cookie factory and cookie distribution and cookie sales, staff for a new CIO. Right. Like the time to let kind of the old guard go is probably beyond when you're like, hey, we've got a growth initiative. Like, you probably should have thought about it beforehand. And that's not restricted to the CIO and the CTO.
Yeah.
Right. But anyone with a C title that's going to be in that room that can't think their way outside a paper bag, probably time to replace them.
True.
Right.
And the implement isn't just the do. In other words, we've defined a list of things that we have to do, but it's also the precedence, right? It's also the order. It's also the cost and how that impacts your current budget. All of those are
drag. It's how ready you are for it.
Yeah.
Are those even the right decisions?
Right.
Like it's all of that that's required. Organizational change control, project management, change management, all of that is required. And again, if that's the point that you bring in the CIO, it's way too late. It's way too late because you're going to end up redoing, like, just to stack up. You're going to redo 20% of the strategy, 10% of the analysis, and 5% of the definition.
Right.
Right? Do you really want to redo all that? It's a waste of time. And I'm being nice on the percentages. There have been plenty of times where I've been called in and I'm like, yeah, we're not doing any of that.
Yeah, we can't do any of this. We're
We're
just
not
come up with
equipped to
this
do any of that. I mean, if you add a comma to the budget, I'll make it happen.
Right.
Right.
This requires an entirely new ERP at $100 million.
Yes. And guess what? Every other system that touches is 10 years out of date.
Right.
And we have to bring 80% of those up to date.
Right.
And our staff is also 80% out of date. And before you start looking at me and shaking your head, I don't mean the IT staff is 80% out of date. I'm also looking at everyone around the table, because guess what? IT is a spider. We touch all of your employees as well. They're also out of date.
Right.
Right. Whereas if you start with define and the CIO says that, you go, okay, well, what do we do? Well, what we do is we stand it up as a separate, wholly owned subsidiary. And then we don't have any of those problems. And then the integrations are much more minor, and we can change over time. Or whatever it happens to be.
So final stage, monitor, which is relatively close to analyze, right? Analyze is past till now, monitors now to future, right? So I'm forecasting and predicting rather than descriptive analysis, but in many ways same technological implementation. It might be a different set of technologists, right? It might be
also granular, where analyze isn't designed to be as granular, right?
Yeah,
and
and
it's also real time and up
it
to
may
date.
in fact require new information, right? What I knew from before is not
and prescriptive, and
So, but still familiar IT work, I guess, is sort of my point there.
Sure.
Right? Which is good. It's just more reports and dashboards to build. So, if you were to summarize, CIO and CTO is required as part of the growth program of any organization.
Yeah. Summary: yes, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. There you go, Carlos.
But this also means if you're going to be a CIO, if you're going to be a CTO, then you must have a growth mindset. There is no two ways about it, right? You have to move out of the I'm responsive to whatever is in front of me. I answer help desk tickets and I balance a budget. It's not the job. It hasn't been the job for a decade.
Right.
Growth mindset is absolutely required. If you have a one-on-one with the CEO, and please, I hope you're not reporting to the CFO anymore, and you're not spending half of that time suggesting ways to improve how the business makes money, you're doing it wrong. And the other half should be them telling you how they'd like to make money and you listening. Right? If you spend all your time just giving project updates, send an email instead and don't waste either of your time.
Right. Yeah.
I love the conversation, hearing you guys and getting the details, because a lot of people don't talk about this, but then they expect those results. So understanding that, getting clear. I like the define, analyze, strategize, implement, and monitor. Like, those are areas where not only the technologies, but like you said, this is what the business is doing, and how you can contribute to it will make the difference. So my friends, make sure that you take the time, like, go back, pause, write down, pause again. Am I doing it? No, I need to make this a priority. Write down your notes, send us a message. Make sure you share, you subscribe, and we'll see you on our next episode.